which became more and more complicated and complex as time went on, until you had the whole evolutionary tree, starting with simple, going to complex. Insects. Here you have an insect with straight wings. You have insects with folded wings. And of course science will tell you that the one with a straight wing will be the primitive one, and the one that can fold its wing and it's more complicated, like a beetle for example, must be more complex. But when they appear in the fossil record, they're there at exactly the same time. And there's no evidence that there's any grade in between them. Time and again, wind, water and ice have destroyed rocks that have been elevated to form continents. That there is a fossil record at all seems rather remarkable. That comes from Evolution of Life by Olson. So why do we have a fossil record still left if erosion could have or should have eroded the planet many times over? But here's the biggest problem. Time magazine picked up on a scientific debate that has been raging for many, many years. And they called it Evolution's Big Bang. And there's a subheading, Evolving at Supersonic Speed. Now these are the neo-Darwinists, people like Stephen Jay Gould, who have been saying that there is evidence for very, very, very rapid development of life. In fact, they call it when life exploded. That's fascinating, because this is totally contrary to what Darwinism stands for. Darwinism says that the organisms developed, and slowly the one evolved into the other over millions and millions of years, starting with simple organisms going to more and more complex. But now we don't find that in the fossil record. Now this was the article as it appeared in Scientific American, and it's titled The Big Bang of Animal Evolution. So now let's go to the scientific journal and let's ask the scientists what the real issues are out there. Now the author of that article is Jeffrey Leventon. He's professor and chair of the Department of Ecology and Evolution at the State University of New York, Stony Brook. And this man is the professor of evolution and ecology at this prestigious university. And he talks about the Cambrian explosion. Now the Cambrian, you must know, is that layer at the bottom of the column where life in the macro form first appeared. So that is evolution as we see it, developing from that very primitive beginning, according to science. Now it says over here, the Cambrian explosion was characterized by the sudden and roughly simultaneous appearance of many diverse animal forms 600 million years ago. What does it say?
600 million.
600 million years ago, sudden, simultaneous appearance. And he talks about an evolutionary tree, but in actual fact, he says, what appears to be an evolutionary lawn. Now science would have us believe that you started with one organism which evolved into different kinds, and so you got more and more complicated. That's why you have the tree structure, starting with one, going more and more complicated. So you start with something like a unicellular organism, which eventually becomes multicellular, and then various body layers, and gets more and more complicated. But in actual fact, what science finds is not a tree, but a lawn, which means everything is there, chip, 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 at the same time. That's very interesting. On the other hand, he also found evidence obtained from sequencing 18S ribosomal RNA from various species suggests that many of the phyla appeared almost simultaneously. Wow! Now a phylum is a big group. The arthropods, for example, all the jointed legged animals, from the insects down the crabs to the crayfish, all of those together. Or the phylum Chordata, the one to which we belong. All these phyla appeared suddenly. And so Gould writes, fast turns out to be much faster than anyone ever thought. See, this is the scientific literature. I'm quoting here from the journal Nature. a very evolutionary journal. In his article, Of It Not Above It, Stephen Jay Gould, he admits that this is a very strange phenomenon. He says over here, older textbooks proclaim that our phylum, now that's the highest one, that's the one that we belong to, the Chordata, did not appear until the Ordovician period, and later evolution must imply advanced status. In other words, we're very advanced because we're very high up in the evolutionary tree. We developed very late. But the Burgess shale contains a chordate. Oops. Oops. What does that mean? The description of a beautifully preserved and unambiguously identified chordate from the earlier Qingyang fauna seals the fate of what he calls this misguided effort in asserting specialness for us. Chordates arose in the Cambrian explosion, period. In other words, every single phylum, including the one that we belong to, was there from the beginning. Not me saying this is the scientific literature. If everything was there from the beginning, doesn't that sound like creation to you?
Yeah.
Sounds like it to me. It says over here, these marvelously preserved, soft-bodied Cambrian organisms have proven, now listen to this, that full diversity was reached within the explosion. Everything was there from the beginning. What the textbooks tell you, that it evolved slowly over millions of years, is not based on the evidence of the fossils. It's based on the mindset of the scientist. The evidence says everything was there from the beginning. Gould continues and he says, Charles Darwin faced this challenge to his gradualistic preference with characteristic honesty. Writing in the first edition of Origin of Species, the case at present must remain inexplicable and may be truly urged as a valid argument against the views here entertained. So is this a new idea, or did Charles Darwin know it already? Yep. Darwin knew it already. So the whole concept comes from a mindset, not the evidence of the fossils. In fact, the creatures were there at the same time, and now you're taking from what is there and you're conjecturing as to how they could possibly have evolved. So you have straight lines, you don't really have trees. All these linking lines are in the mind, not in the fossils. So you have all these creatures living side by side, having not a common origin, but a simultaneous origin. Brings me to the dinosaurs. The truth about the dinosaurs. Are they really so strange? And did they really live so many millions of years ago? And did they really give rise to birds and all these strange questions? Well, the answer is that a dinosaur is nothing other than a giant reptile. And you know something interesting? The fossil record shows that everything in the past was bigger than it is today.